from where she vanished. Tibbetts' family continues to ask the public for help.
Whether they saw Molly or whether they saw something that was out of place that seems insignificant, and they're reluctant to come forward with that information because they don't want to clog up the investigation. There is no information too insignificant.
Matt Finn begins our coverage live in Brooklyn, Iowa today. Matt, good morning.
Bill, good morning. Unfortunately, that possible sighting of Molly Tibbetts at a Kansas City truck stop has not provided any leads. Investigators say that they conducted a search and did witness interviews, and unfortunately, nothing. Now, back here live in Brooklyn, Iowa, Molly's hometown, where she went missing on July 18th, the family of Molly Tibbetts and Crime Stoppers of Central Iowa will hold a press conference in just a few hours in which we expect them to announce a major increase in the reward money for Molly Tibbetts, perhaps over $100,000. Crime Stoppers tells Fox News that the family of Molly Tibbetts this morning believes that Molly is alive and being held captive somewhere. And until proven otherwise, they are going to continue to try to recover her. This morning, it seems like the family and Crime Stoppers is really ramping up their personal and private efforts to recover Molly. And they are cooperating with authorities and facilitating them. But it seems like right now they are trying to raise as much money and much awareness to recover Molly Tibbetts. Bill.
Also, her boyfriend spoke to FoxNews.com yesterday at length. I understand he's back in the house where she was staying when she disappeared on the 18th of July, Matt.
Dalton Jack tells Fox News he is back in that house where Molly went missing. He has not gone inside the bedroom where she has gone missing. We asked him if he noticed any signs of a struggle or forced entry at this house, and he said he would not comment because investigators asked him not to jeopardize the integrity of their investigation. Interesting, the boyfriend also tells us that the doors to this home were probably not locked on the day that Molly went missing. He says people do not lock their doors in small town Iowa. And regarding what he thinks happened, he says he has no idea.
Everybody has their own theories, but I'm just kind of leaving it up to the law enforcement to try and figure that one out. And just don't want to go racking it through my brain thinking of what happened, just driving myself insane because I know everybody else around here is, and you just got to lead by example and try to just let the law enforcement do their job. They're trained for this.
Here in Brooklyn, Iowa, it is a classic Main Street, USA small town. It is nestled in farmland and greenery and cornfields, as you can imagine. There's a gas station right off Interstate 80 where anybody coming off the highway or going to the highway might stop. So Fox News has learned that police have taken all the surveillance from that gas station, which might provide them for any leads. And, you know, the family says, and Crime Stoppers says, unfortunately, they are not ruling out the fact that someone could have got off I-80 and abducted Molly here in Brooklyn, Iowa. Bill,
more to come, Matt Finn, thank you very much. Live in Brooklyn, Iowa.
We will have much more on this developing story for you. Molly Tibbetts' father, Ron Tibbetts, and her boyfriend, Dalton Jack, join us live later in the show. We will speak with them about Molly and her disappearance at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, just ahead of that news conference we expect in the noon hour. Meanwhile, another Fox News alert. Special counsel Robert Mueller responding to a letter from President Trump's personal attorneys about the scope of a potential interview. Mueller reportedly agreeing to cut the number of questions that would be asked of the president. Doug McKelway joins us live from the White House. Doug, any presidential tweets yet on the Mueller investigation?
Not in the past 24 hours ago, but that tweet from about 24 hours ago is still resonating as lawyers debate whether it is helpful to the president or potentially putting him in serious legal jeopardy. Just to refresh your memory about that tweet, quote, Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop this rigged witch hunt right now before it continues to stain our country any further. Bob Mueller is totally conflicted, and his 17 angry Democrats that are doing his dirty work are a disgrace to the USA. Well, a couple of well-respected lawyers who are deeply familiar to Fox News viewers say that tweet is trouble, but for very different reasons. Jonathan Turley, writing in USA Today, said, quote, those who insist that these tweets constitute obstruction of justice are dangerously misinformed. Subjects and even targets of investigations do not surrender their First Amendment rights. But Judge Andrew Napolitano, writing in FoxNews.com and also in the Washington Times, says that the ferocity of these tweets and the defense by Rudy Giuliani of the president's tweets give Mueller just enough ammunition to petition a federal judge to have Giuliani removed as the president's counsel. Quote, that's because the rules of legal ethics prohibit lawyers from attacking the credibility of likely witnesses against their clients outside the courtroom. This is especially so for government witnesses. When defense counsel attack those witnesses in public, the government often views that as witness tampering. But both Turley and Napolitano agree that it would be wise for the president to simply stop his tweeting about Mueller. The White House, however, disagrees.
Look, the president is not obstructing. He's fighting back. The president is stating his opinion. He's stating it clearly, and he's certainly expressing the frustration that he has with the level of corruption that we've seen from people like Jim Comey, Peter Strzok, Andrew McCabe. There's a reason that the president's angry, and frankly, most of America is angry as well, and there's no reason he shouldn't be able to voice that opinion.
And while Attorney General Jeff Sessions is refusing comment, keep in mind that last fall he appointed U.S. Attorney John Huber to investigate potential malfeasance at the FBI and the DOJ. Huber has yet to release his findings. Sandra?
So, Doug, what's the latest on whether or not the president will actually sit down for an interview with Robert Mueller?
Well, both sides continued negotiations. They have offered counter proposals. The latest is that Mr. Mueller has narrowed the scope of the questions that he would pose to President Trump. The White House is apparently working on a response to that. As much as the president may want to clear the air through an interview with Mr. Mueller, keep in mind that almost any attorney in a situation like this cautions his client against doing such an interview. It is fraught with peril. Sandra, back to you.
Doug McKelway at the White House for us this morning. Thank you.
Meanwhile, on the trail, President Trump goes to Pennsylvania later, crisscrossing the country to campaign for Republicans running for Congress. The president trying to help Republican Senate candidate Lou Barletta defeat the Democratic incumbent Senator Bob Casey in Pennsylvania. Chris Direwald, Fox News politics editor. How are you, Reverend? Good day to you, sir. You got Pennsylvania event today. You got a big election on Tuesday next week in Ohio. Here's the headline from Politico. Trump, Pelosi dominate Ohio special election. Is this shaping up to be a lot of people talk about a referendum on Donald Trump? Is it the same for Pelosi and Democrats as we gain momentum?
Well, that has been the cornerstone of the Republican effort to hold on to the House, which is to tie every Democratic candidate to Nancy Pelosi and say, essentially, as a Democrat runs to argue to voters, I'll be a check on Donald Trump. And what the Republicans are going to say in almost every case is, yeah, but you're going to be a rubber stamp for Nancy Pelosi. And that is the polarizing split that swing voters are going to be forced into this fall. And it's going to happen on Tuesday in Ohio in what's turned out to be a surprisingly close race.
Yeah, and we'll see how it turns out then. Big coverage coming up next week. Meanwhile, you've got on the left, on the far left, you've got this rise of the socialist movement. You have a candidate in the state of Washington who's trying to do what a candidate in New York has already done, and that's defeat a longtime Democratic incumbent in the primary out there. Sarah Smith is her name. She's 30 years old, and I talked to her last night on The Story, working for Martha, and said this.
Right now, people talk a lot about cost when it comes to these kinds of things, Bill. So they talk a lot about cost for a single-payer healthcare system. The system we have now costs taxpayers $47 trillion.
$47 trillion.
A single-payer system, and a single-payer system would wind up changing that cost. It would reduce that cost to $33 trillion.
So you're
that's
actually
a figure that's widely quoted.
Yeah, you're saving us money then, is that right?
Single-payer systems save money.
There's the argument. I don't know when socialism ever saved money, but apparently that's the line, Chris.
Well, look, in her district and for what she's doing, that's probably a good answer. Democrats have a great opportunity on health insurance. Republicans dropped the ball on the 1 yard line, and they have screwed it up to a fare thee well. After 8 years of running against Obamacare, given the opportunity to put something new in its place, they failed. This gives Democrats a big opportunity, but it creates an opening for radical candidates, for the far left to come in, candidates like the woman you interviewed yesterday, to come in and say, yes, we have a plan, and it's a plan that obviously would not sell well in places like that district in Ohio where they're having their primary tomorrow with a lot of suburbs and a lot of rural area. Can Democrats take advantage of the opportunity that Republicans have given them on health insurance without succumbing to the far left? And can they do it soon enough so they can have a coherent message going into the fall?
Okay.
Those are substantial questions.
Well framed. Rich Lowry, New York Post, writes the following. On that very point, Republicans need to develop and push their own ideas to reduce health care costs and adjust to the new reality where socialism doesn't simply represent a laugh line, but a battle that needs to be won. He says fight ideas with ideas, Chris.
Well, right now, the Republicans' primary objective is to avoid shutting down the government before the election. This is a lovely thought for Republicans that Rich has. This is a very nice idea that if they could do it, but they do not have anything like that kind of unity and coherence right now to even get the basics done, let alone start to articulate this vision. They're going to remember, House Republicans are going to have a speaker election, or they're going to have maybe a minority leader election pretty soon. The direction of the Republican Party on this and a lot of issues is yet to be written.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
District 12 on Tuesday in Ohio. Talk to you real soon.
See you in Zanesville.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Right on.
And by the way, coming up, we'll hear from Congressman Lou Barletta a little bit later in the show. Will a Trump bump help him in his race? That's coming up, 9:40 a.m. Eastern.
Looking forward to talking to him. We'll see where the state of play is right now in Pennsylvania. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing this morning,
We're just getting started. We're just scratching the surface. Vice President Mike Pence celebrating progress with North Korea as the presumed remains of American soldiers arrive back in the U.S.
Today is just a beginning. Our work will not be complete until all our fallen heroes are accounted for and home.
It was quite a moment in Pearl Harbor last night. Look at the caskets with the stars and stripes draped over them. The president also expressing thanks to North Korea, but some are skeptical. The apparent show of good faith. We'll find out more on that today. Plus, there is this.
This is new, terrifying video out of that plane crash in Mexico. What happened inside of that plane at the moment of impact?
Oh, remarkable. Also, President Trump's trade policies prompting some to draw comparisons to Ronald Reagan. We're hearing from Reagan's former economic advisor. Art Laffer will address that coming up next, live.
We know that if America wants more jobs, greater prosperity, and a dynamic, competitive economy, the answer is more world trade, not less.
Why do experts believe silver could rise to $100 an ounce? Because
Chicago activists demanding the city's mayor, Rahm Emanuel, resign ahead of anti-violence protests set for tonight. Protesters saying Emanuel has failed to get the city's gun crime under control. Organizers are gearing up for what could be a chaotic rally, since it will coincide with a couple big events, including the Cubs game and the start of the Lollapalooza Music Festival.
The president ultimately wants less tariffs, less non-tariff trade barriers, level playing field, no subsidies, the whole 9 yards. But to get there, we have to make it more painful for them to continue these bad practices than to modify them. That's what this is all about.
Really interesting comments. U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross calling it a tactic aimed at lowering trade barriers, helping the American economy. President Trump threatening to increase proposed tariffs to $200 billion more worth on Chinese imports this week. Art Laffer, former economic advisor for President Ronald Reagan. Art, how you doing? Good morning to you, sir.
Very well, Bill. How are you?
Well, I'm fine, thank you. Your piece this week got a lot of attention. I'll share it with viewers. The title, How Trump Could Be Like Reagan. It's asking a lot, Art. All right, here's what you say. Just as Ronald Reagan once pushed for abolishing nuclear weapons, President Trump should call for ending tariffs. Make the case.
Yeah, well, I think it is. That every economist believes, or almost every economist, that a free trade world with no barriers, no subsidies, no non-tariff barriers, all of that would be really good for the world economy, the U.S. and other countries. It's a win-win for everyone. And what we really need to do is, how do we get there? How do we get other countries to drop their barriers against U.S. goods? And the way Trump has chosen to do it is by threatening tariffs and bringing them to the table. And as you can see already with the EU, it's working. working. It's working with Mexico. I think it can work with a lot of other countries. But the goal is always zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, and no subsidies. And I think, Bill, I think we're going to get there, or at least in great distance on that way.
Why do you think that? Before you answer it, the headline out of China today, Chinese shares tumbled the most in a month on Thursday, meaning today, after President Trump instructed his trade rep to go for $200 billion more. Are you saying that we're squeezing Beijing into a deal?
I think that's true, and China is very vulnerable to the U.S. economy. I mean, they've had huge growth rates for 50 years, Bill, way higher than any other major country in the world economy. And even with all of that, their GDP per adult is still about 1/8 of what the U.S. is. They still are a very poor, backward nation in many, many respects. And China can ill afford to behave badly now if they want to continue prosperity. You know, they're no longer this little less developed country where you give them the free slack of protecting their domestic industries. That's not available anymore, Bill. I mean, we have to literally make sure China competes freely like everyone else. And Japan, too. Japan's notorious for its barriers against U.S. products.
Back to your op-ed. This is what you write on screen. Mr. Trump would be transformed from the evil disruptor of international commerce to a potential savior, just as 30 years ago, Mr. Reagan's international image changed from super hawk to peacemaker almost overnight. That's if you get to zero tariffs.
Or if you get a long way there. I mean, obviously, it doesn't have to be zero tariffs on everything, but moving in that direction, which is exactly what Reagan did. I mean, and Reagan did it by threatening the evil empire, if you remember, and all of this other stuff. And then when he made that famous speech in Congress in 1984, where he said, you know, we need to have no nuclear weapons. No, we didn't get to no nuclear weapons. That's true. But we surely made a lot of progress on denuclearizing the world and getting rid of the threat of a nuclear war.
You make an interesting
case. It's amazing what he did.
What is the level of patience? How long does it take? Because it's my understanding this could be months away. And who knows, $200 billion now, maybe it goes to $500 billion. Can you stand that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's an election process issue. But frankly, it may take a lot of years to really get in that direction, just like the Reagan reductions in nuclear weapons took many years. But there's no reason why we can't shoot for the North Star, Bill. Why we can't try to do the right thing and bring all those countries in and get them all to reduce their trade barriers, tariffs, and subsidies and make it really, truly a free trade world. That's the goal. That's the dream. And that's what we need to be pursuing. And, you know, I'm very pleased with the way Trump has articulated his zero tariff, zero subsidy, and zero non-tariff barrier objective. Now, whether the strategy will work or not, you know, I'm not an expert on strategy. It's way above my pay grade. But I do know the goal, the dream, the objective, the North Star is the right goal, dream, and objective.
Hope you come back soon. Thank you, Art.
I would love to, Bill. Thank you. And say hello to Sandra for me.
Hello, Sandra.
Hello, Art.
Hello, how are you?
Come back soon. The TSA is reportedly considering getting rid of passenger screening at more than 100 of our airports. So why would they do that, and why now?
Also, a new development in the Obama administration's gun-running scandal known as Fast and Furious, why the family of that murdered Border Patrol agent Brian Terry could be one step closer today to justice.
On our side of the border, I believe there's a lot of politicians involved in this. I believe there's a lot of officials in the Justice Department from the previous administration. They're involved in this, and I think there's a lot of dirty hands, and I think the reason they're hiding it because they don't want the names exposed.
Now said to be examining a proposal that suggests doing away with passenger screening at some small and medium-sized airports across the U.S. could save about $115 million every year, we're told. The proposal would affect about 150 airports that offer flights with fewer passengers. Critics say it's dangerous. The TSA said to be meeting to talk about and analyze potential security risks.
I'll bet everybody at home has some thoughts on that.
What do you think? I mean, you fly through some of these really small airports out west and you wonder why they're so staffed and manned the way they are.
People just want to feel safe when they're traveling. They want to get where they're going. A lot of people don't feel bothered by all the security measures. I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
The other thing I would add is that on 9/11s, you know, Mohammed Atta flew through the airport in Portland, Maine, which isn't a huge airport. It's not super small either. But you wonder how you strike a balance if you're going to go forward that way. You raise a good point about security.
Yep. Yeah. Keep us safe. The U.S. Attorney's Office says the man accused of killing U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry back in 2010 has been extradited to the United States from Mexico. Terry was shot while he and other Border Patrol agents were in a gunfight with a group of illegal immigrants, reportedly carrying guns from the Obama administration's Fast and Furious operation. His family says they are relieved, but they're still searching for answers. Anita Vogel, live in Los Angeles with this. Anita?
Well, good morning, Sandra. You know, really a mix of emotions from the family. Relief the accused murder suspect has been brought to the U.S., but still so much anguish over what happened to Brian. Horacio Osorio Arellanes is one of the Mexican gang members accused in the killing of U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry back in 2010. He was extradited from Mexico on Monday and pleaded not guilty yesterday in Tucson to first-degree murder and 8 other charges. Terry was shot and killed on December 14, 2010, during an encounter with a Mexican gang south of the border. It turned out the guns the gang members used had originally been purchased from the U.S. government, and that exposed something called Fast and Furious, a secret program under the Obama administration aimed at tracking who was buying the guns and how they were being used. Earlier today, the brother of Brian Terry spoke out on Fox and Friends about how the family is feeling now.
Release the documents unredacted. They need to reinvestigate the agents from ATF that were involved in this. Because let's not forget, they're all still actively working. Nobody's been fired like the ATF said they had.
Terry's family says there is still so much they don't know. They're currently pressing the Trump administration to unseal documents sealed under the guise of executive privilege by the Obama administration. The family has said they believe there is an orchestrated effort by the previous administration to conceal any link between Terry's death and the botched firearms operation. Meanwhile, the man accused of killing Terry, Osorio Arellanes, will face a trial somewhere in the United States on September 11th. Sandra, back to you.
Anita Vogel reporting from Los Angeles for us. Thank you.
There could be a possible new development in the disappearance of Molly Tibbetts. Why a new witness coming forward says that Molly may have been spotted in a different state. So more on that detail coming up in a moment here. And
the Trump administration making good on a promise to target Turkey if they don't free an American pastor held on terror charges. Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois joins us on that next.
Also, this was sober. It was somber. The Vice President Mike Pence paying homage to our fallen heroes as they finally make their way home decades later after the Korean War.
And to our honored dead, we breathe a word of thanks for your service and sacrifice. And we say to you, as one people with one voice, welcome home.
We are awaiting a news conference from the family of Molly Tibbetts as the search for the missing Iowa University student continues into its second week now. That news conference set to start at noon. The last confirmed sighting of Molly was on July 18th, and that was when she went for a jog in her boyfriend's town of Brooklyn, Iowa. Police are now checking into a possible sighting of Tibbetts in the Kansas City, Missouri area days after her reported disappearance. We're going to have much more on this developing story for you as it becomes available.
Poignant images from a solemn ceremony last evening at Pearl Harbor. The Vice President Mike Pence receiving what could be the remains of at least 55 U.S. soldiers from the Korean War some 65 years later. Each case covered with an American flag for a homecoming that has been a long time in the making.
Some have called the Korean War the forgotten war. But today, we prove these heroes were never forgotten. Today, our boys are coming home. Today, they are known but to God. But soon we will know their names, and we will tell their stories of courage.
President Trump tweeting overnight, quote, "Thank you to Chairman Kim Jong-un for keeping your word and starting the process of sending home the remains of our great and beloved missing fallen. I am not at all surprised that you took this kind action. Also, thank you for your nice letter. I look forward to seeing you soon." Benjamin Hall picks it up from there. How significant is the ceremony, Benjamin?
Bill, this is one of the biggest issues when it comes to dealing with North Korea, and it's been going on for decades. It's also incredibly emotional. My own father served in the 7th Infantry in the Korean War, and speaking to him, you realise how important the returns of these remains are to the families of all those who are involved. Now, of course, comes the task of identifying those bodies, those 55 caskets which came back, even trying to get others returned from North Korea. At the ceremony, Vice President Pence also said that the return did show that real progress is also being made with North Korea.
I know that President Trump is grateful that Chairman Kim has kept his word. And we see today as tangible progress in our efforts to achieve peace on the Korean Peninsula.
And Vice President Pence was then presented with a flag which was used to cover the Korean War memorials, and they arrived by military cargo jet from South Korea. And he also said that in his negotiations, or in President Trump's negotiations with Kim Jong-un, that he always kept the fallen veterans in his heart. Bill?
Any progress that we can talk about on the nuclear disarmament issue, Ben?
Well, this is a very mixed bag. Of course, there's progress being made. Many people point to the remains coming back, the dismantlement of the nuclear facility in the north and of a ballistic missile site. But since the Singapore summit, that one key point, nuclear disarmament, has not really shown much signs of moving forward. And even Secretary Pompeo admitted recently that North Korea is still producing fissile material for their bombs, and satellite images show that missiles are still being developed. But there's also speculation that Secretary Pompeo, who's currently en route to Singapore for an ASEAN forum, might meet his North Korean counterpart on the sidelines there, and it's hoped that more real, tangible progress might come from that. And the new U.S. ambassador to South Korea has also urged Pyongyang to release more details just on its North Korean nuclear testing facilities, because at least that would be the first sign of forward progress and possibly even getting weapons inspectors in there. But until that happens, not that much.
Thank you, Benjamin. Benjamin Hall in London today. Thank you.
We've seen no evidence that Pastor Brunson has done anything wrong, and we believe he is a victim of unfair and unjust detention by the government of Turkey. At the president's direction, the Department of Treasury is sanctioning Turkey's Minister of Justice and Minister of Interior, both of whom played leading roles in the arrest and detention of Pastor Brunson.
That's Press Secretary Sarah Sanders announcing new sanctions against Turkey, a NATO ally, for its refusal to free the American pastor Andrew Brunson. Congressman Adam Kinzinger is on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He joins us now. Congressman, thanks for being here this morning. Was this a good move on the part of the administration?
This was a huge move, and based on the previous story, this idea, and I learned it in military training, your country will never leave you behind, in many cases extends to even civilians, and it makes us very different than a lot of other nations. A pastor has been basically held on trumped-up terrorism charges as a bargaining chip for Erdogan to get back a cleric that he thinks is behind the failed coup against him. And look, Erdogan himself said that democracy is like a streetcar. You ride it until the stop you want to get off. He's gotten off the democracy stop, and he's holding an American basically hostage. President Trump did absolutely the right thing here, and they also basically laid out the fact that there could be follow-on sanctions, which I believe could almost follow the Russian model. And I'll tell you, with the Turkey lira in a tailspin and the economy struggling, that would be a massive blow to the Turkish economy. So it would definitely be wise for Mr. Erdogan to release his pastor.
Well, Erdogan has fired right back. Turkey's response: there is no doubt that the decision, which disrespectfully intervenes with our judicial system, stands in contrast to the essence of our relations and will seriously damage the constructive efforts made in order to resolve problems between the two countries. What does this do to already hurt U.S.-Turkey relations, Congressman?
Well, I think what it does is put us back in the driver's seat with the relationship with Turkey. I mean, they're a NATO ally almost in name only. They're very important. It's a very important nation in a very important location. But the maneuvers we've been seeing by Turkey over the last few years, their deteriorating relationship with Israel, the fact that they're trying to buy the Russian missile defense system and the F-35, which, by the way, Congress and the administration will never allow those two things to be together. They are in a very bad place, and the United States has to show some, I don't know if tough love, tough affection, or whatever to Turkey, but saying you're not going to walk on the alliance and us anymore, and you're not going to abuse American citizens. Release this